Greetings, friends! Today we're going to be continuing our delve into the concept of, is the customer always right? Which, is a little bit stupid, I suppose, because, well, we've kind of already answered that question, and I guess, in response, I should stop calling this series by that name, since we've made it fairly clearly from the first installment that the customer is often wrong, for any number of reasons. But so far we've gone through a lot of anecdotes, some research, but not a lot of hard data. So today let's get into some of that juicy data.
I want that juicy shack. Wait.
Am I lying? I'm not lying. I'm not lying.
I knew you wanted it! I knew it!
As such, what we're going to be looking at today is just what is this entire concept we've been talking about, customer satisfaction. What is the importance of said customer satisfaction on financial outcomes, particularly when it concerns capitulation to customer demands and complaints, both short-term and over time. As many of you may have noticed recently, there's been a lot of debate and struggle and conflict over this issue of whether or not it's better to appease the customer by firing someone or by restructuring your project or organization to appease a customer, when oftentimes they may not even be your core customer base. Thus, we have to ask, what is the value of hiring or firing an employee in contrast to the value of the service being met of an irate customer for your business success in the long term? So as such, let's talk about acquiescence to assholes and its association with accounting. Gee, I really like alliteration. In the second part, I mentioned some research and anecdotes from successful CEOs, including the former CEOs of both Southwest and Continental Airlines, in their condemnation of the concept of the customer as first being inherently detrimental to businesses as a model because it potentially damages employees, and because often the people complaining the loudest are not your core customer base. Something one could argue given the history of Papa John's stock prices over the past year, since Papa John Schneider spoke out against the NFL's improper handling of public relations regarding players kneeling for the national anthem, as while immediately the stock prices in the company dropped following Schneider's statements, they returned mostly to normal shortly thereafter, and the company appeared to be mostly getting back on track until, again, this new controversy. But that return to normal at first, that happened after there was very little action that was taken in public by the Papa John's Corporation against John Schneider. Yes, he was probably asked to step down, and did, but there was no major public condemnation or disassociation with Papa John, such as there has been in recent weeks. I would argue that this could in part be because the core customer base of Papa John's is the average middle class, and yes, by the way, the middle class still exists, crazy eyes.
But that upper middle class doesn't exist anymore in America.
Well, that's the problem. Keep in mind, she in the past has said, look, the reason unemployment is so low is because people have 2 or 3 jobs and they're working 70 or 80 hours per week, which a number of fact finders found as a pants on fire lie. But
they're just full of crazy. It's terrifying.
Americans, and those middle class average Americans, they care more about the product, more about the actual pizza being affordable and tasty than about any kind of public relations or marketing or optics. As I said, Papa John's stock only really began to suffer majorly again when Schneider was given Das Boot for his horrific Nazi dog whistling by saying a word in the English language in context.
Saying midget is like saying nigger. And I was like, whoa. First of all, we're both white. And if somebody hears you, I'm not protecting you. Secondly, it's not the same thing because our ancestors didn't own midgets, all right? Not unless they won some crazy high-stakes poker game that was like, I'm going all in, plus the court jesters.
Now, you could argue to the contrary with the case of Subway, and I would agree that they would have lost a ton of support had they continued to in any way associate themselves with Jared. But since he's been removed from all of their marketing and promotional materials, their stock has continued to plummet. To put that into context, that's been in the wake of not just that single one, but 3 or more additional PR kind of disasters, only one of which involved any public call to fire or remove a person over anything approaching politics. Subway got ousted as baking their bread with material that was made from the same stuff as yoga mats, and filling those said yoga buns, no, not that kind, with Soylent chicken. So let's just say that Jared was not the only cause of Subway's recent financial troubles.
Jared from Subway, he got in trouble for being a pervert. I was doing PR for Subway, and Jared was my idea.
Nothing to do with what's going on right now.
They're making the bread out of yoga mat material.
Right.
I used to say, make no namaste about it. These sandwiches are delicious.
Well, you need some medical attention.
Subway!
Make no namaste about it.
Not most likely. So the question remains, because it seems a little bit up in the air. Did Papa John's stock continue to go down because they fired or removed Papa John? Or did it go down because it was going to go down anyway just over this public outrage, even though, you know, it bounced back before? And as we've seen, oftentimes stocks do bounce back after a great PR nightmare. But then we have Subway in contrast. It seems that firing someone has no effect. But before we look at the data, let's look a little bit away from pizza and fast food and restaurants, because a lot of what we're talking about with all of these scandals happening in social media and across Twitter, with the firing of people like James Gunn, the protection of Dan Harmon by Cartoon Network, or the firing of Roseanne, that's all media related. So let's look to media. I want to compare and contrast two very similar crowd-funded indie video games that came out in 2017, Yooka-Laylee and A Hat in Time. Both games were heavily influenced by the beloved platforming collect-em-all game Banjo-Kazooie, and in part due to that influence, both employed the voice acting work of Jonathan Jafari, aka YouTuber JonTron, an avid and very public fan of Banjo-Kazooie, to lend his voice to their projects. In both games, this was to be a relatively small role, intended to be more of an Easter egg, a fun addition for players and fans of JonTron to find as they played the game.
Oh, hey, little chirper. They're recording right now, so no one's allowed in. You're only insured for bird staff. Letting you in would be a liability. Don't even think about sneaking inside.
After JonTron was lambasted and, in my opinion, often outright slandered by the "we're so corrupt we make CNN look like actually the world's most trusted name in news" gaming media.
But why? He said that he was not impressed by the new Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, obviously, you have to remove this man from the game.
Because he expressed, frankly, milquetoast no-brainer ideas like, quote, "no one wants to be a minority in their own country because, duh, no one wants to be a minority in their own country." Both developers came under heavy fire to remove John's dulcet, velvety voice from their games. And here's where we can start to make our little comparison. Yooka-Laylee's developers, Playtonic, were quick to respond by removing John's voice from the final game. So quick, in fact, that the sound files were still available on the physical disc. That's why we know what it sounded like. In contrast, and despite similar backlash, Gears for Breakfast, the developers behind A Hat in Time, kept John's lines in the game. So, let's look at the outcomes, financially and successfully, for both games about a year after the fact. First, let me describe the similarities and differences between these games for clarity. John had been attached to the Hat in Time project since around 2014, and to the Yooka-Laylee project since about 2015. So in both cases, his involvement was long anticipated by fans and backers. Yooka-Laylee was one of the biggest game projects on Kickstarter at the time of its funding. reaching 2.1 million pounds of the 175,000 pounds that it requested. That's 12 times the proposed figure. A Hat in Time was a much smaller project, although not really excessively so, receiving slightly under 300,000 of its 30 grand proposal. That's 10 times what the developers requested. So although there is a significant difference in project size, we're looking at similar projects beyond just the tone and themes of the game. We're looking at similar levels of support that went far beyond what the creators anticipated or needed. And what's happened since the games have been released? Did JonTron's inclusion, given that he's a terrible racist Nazi, destroy A Hat in Time? While Yooka-Laylee succeeded far beyond any expectations because they were so brave in removing that evil Nazi.
Oh, I gotcha.
This was a mistake!
Not really. In terms of pure ratings, Yooka-Laylee sports a 7 out of 10 on Steam, a 73% on Metacritic, and a 6.5 on Metacritic from users. In contrast, A Hat in Time boasts a 10 out of 10 on Steam, a 79% on Metacritic, and an 8.5 on Metacritic from users. It is difficult for me to say exactly where sales ended up for either one. I've had a hard time tracking down those exact numbers, particularly because many owners of Yooka-Laylee and A Hat in Time were also backers at first. And because Yooka-Laylee received multi-platform physical releases and all kinds of other stuff that makes it hard to nail that down. But I can tell you this, when Yooka-Laylee first went on sale, it opened to the games market in the UK at 6th place. During its second week, it did reach 2nd in Australia and New Zealand. And in contrast, A Hat in Time has now sold over 500,000 copies just on Steam. Now, hang on, before you rush to the comments to say, hey Aiden, that's not why people disliked Yooka-Laylee, trust me, as a backer, I know. There are many reasons why Yooka-Laylee failed commercially and critically, including that it took months to be released on the Switch, and was generally just a letdown. But the point is not that Yooka-Laylee didn't perform so well. It is that A Hat in Time did. You get me?
You know what I'm saying? I don't, you gotta hold, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about, man.
I have a vague idea what you're talking about.
There was no real observable backlash over time in any metric that we can look to for the game's performance based on their lack of response to the outrage. It continues to sell well on Steam with John's voice intact. Why? Because no one complaining wanted to buy the game in the first place. And even if they did, they were such a small minority, and their rage was so fleeting and impotent that ultimately it meant nothing for the developers to capitulate to their screeching. At most, you risk pissing off even more people by doing so. And there were plenty of posts from Steam users saying they would refuse to buy the game if it did not include John's voice. And in contrast, many paying players were upset and irritated with Playtonic for removing John's voice, given that the inclusion of it was a Kickstarter incentive, and was a reason that some people might have been influenced to purchase the game. Capitulating to who you thought the customer was had no seeming positive effect, and if we look back at Papa John's again, at least from the basic data we see right now, it seems as if firing Papa John or removing him from your business was not a good idea. And there are a lot of companies and industries that we can discuss here, so let's move forward. As I sort of said in the outset, every time I sit down to start recording one of these videos, there is another one of these scandals. Most recently, I guess, there's Ruby Rose, the actress chosen by the CW to play Catherine Kane, Batwoman, in what will surely be a terrible program anyway. She deleted her Twitter after a lot of public backlash that she's gotten because she's not gay enough to play a gay woman, even though she's gay. Yes, Ruby Rose came out as a lesbian at the age of 12, something she has spoken about publicly on numerous occasions, but Twitter and the SJW mob, as always, frothing at the mouth because she is not an unknown gay, trans, queer, whatever actress. And because she's not Jewish. And I mean, it's not as if her sexuality should matter either, guys. It should be whether or not she's a good actress and appropriate for the part. But her religion matters now? Seriously? That's where we're going with this? Hang on a second. Wait a minute. I got a couple questions here. Just a few. Let me pull up my notebook. I thought Jews were indistinguishable from white people. And, by the way, it's not like there are any Jews in Hollywood or anything. There's not any of them there. No. LA is completely void of the people of the tribe.
Yes, bastards. Christoph Waltz played a Nazi obsessed with finding Jews. Well, Christoph? The motherlode!
But moreover, here's just kind of an interesting question I'd like to pose to the audience. Kathy Kane has been Batwoman since 1956, but the current version of the character wasn't introduced until 50 years later. This Kate Kane has a lot of elements that would seemingly make her out to be SJWE bait, but in my opinion, when they were added, they were handled quite well, including that Kate got booted from her service in the Marines under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, and that she's a Jewish woman. Well, I guess she was always a woman, but now she's a Jewish one. And given the current climate, I know that sounds like typical obnoxious attempts at gaining oppression points, but I would say, hey guys, just read J.H. Williams' run on the character, give it a shot, it's actually quite good. However, here's the question I'm posing. If Batwoman is Jewish, and that is now so important to casting, and Kate Kane is Batman's cousin on his mother's side, which I believe has been established, well then under Jewish law and tradition, Bruce Wayne is now Jewish as well. Pieces really starting to come together, aren't they?
What are your superpowers again? I'm rich.
I mostly only bring this up because it's so incredibly freaking stupid. Where is the outcry about Christian Bale or Ben Affleck being cast as Batman then? Point is, either Ruby Rose is gonna quit or CW is going to boot her. Look, as we've all been made well aware of recently, deplatforming is wrong. All it does is create psychological reactance. It makes people more attracted to the thing that they're told they're not allowed to watch, which increases the attractiveness of the person being deplatformed. A la Alex Jones, who is now booming in popularity across all kinds of alternative media, despite the fact that he was removed forcibly from every single major social media outlet. Forcibly removed. For no damn good reason.
And the goddamn fucking liberal fascists censoring us everywhere the last 2 days. We did an emergency fucking 36-hour broadcast trying to stop this shit that could lead to World War III. And you fucking liberal pieces of fucking shit, you fucking assholes, fucking support this. Fuck you, you fucking goddamn degenerate fucks.
And I mention this because we need to be clear. There is a difference between deplatforming a person's freedom of speech and a private business choosing to remove an employee or choosing to change a project or remove a partner in reaction to outrage. That is still the business's kind of decision. Although businesses often make very bad decisions, even when they have the best PR and marketing and economic analysts at hand. Being denied the ability to express your opinion in a public forum is a restriction of your First Amendment rights. That's what happened to Alex Jones. That's not really what happened to Ruby Rose and a lot of other people in these kind of environments. Removing yourself is very different from being removed. So Ruby Rose and Kelly Marie Tran, both of whom were criticized for very different reasons and arguably from opposing political sides of the spectrum, although I would argue that most people were criticizing Tran's character in The Last Jedi, not her inclusion in the film in general, in contrast to Rose being criticized for not being gay enough. That is a personal decision, and maybe that does fit in and helps their personal brand identity. But a business decision is significantly different from a personal one, even when it concerns personal brand identity. It is unrelated to instances such as ABC terminating the Roseanne show after she likened a former Obama staffer to a character from Planet of the Apes, while supposedly a little bit tilted on Ambien.
I decided I was going to try and get a Xanax prescription. I don't know if anyone here has ever tried Xanax, but it's fantastic. Very muted claps for Xanax. You don't really get woos, it's more like, yeah.
Nor is it the same as the removal of James Gunn from future Guardians of the Galaxy films after, all kinds of creepy shit that he posted not just on Twitter, but, oh, Jesus, what? Oh, man, well, yeah, you know, this is the guy that made Slither, and I'm just gonna let Red Letter Media say it better than I could.
Do you think when Disney was saying, who should we get to direct our next big Marvel blockbuster, they said, I know, let's get that guy who made that movie where Ellen Page rapes Rainn Wilson.
A lot of people seem to be claiming that there is a ton of hypocrisy going on here, though, lately, both on the left and the right regarding subjects such as these.
I've been silenced again on Twitter for the second time. Yes, my @demotivator has been suspended. So unless that gets unsuspended, that's probably it for me for Twitter. P.S. Please suspend sociopathic people who are actually dangerous, like Alex Jones.
So here's my take. Removing someone's ability to speak, removing their First Amendment rights, such as what happened to Alex Jones, that's a travesty. A business firing someone because they think that that person's involvement is a detriment to their financial success may be wrong morally, but is it fiscally? Is it really in a business's best interest, as it likely was in the case of Subway to kick Jared? Shouldn't they remove these individuals who are potentially toxic to their economic success? In the case of both Roseanne, whose show was the top rated at the time of her removal, or Guardians of the Galaxy, which was the third top grossing film of 2014 and a complete surprise to every critic given its kind of weirdo premise, and then the fifth top grossing film of 2017 in Guardians 2, beating out every other Kate film of that year besides Wonder Woman, including freaking Justice League. I mean, yeah, it was terrible, but still. Really? Is it in your best interest to fire Roseanne and fire James Gunn, even if they did fuck up? You want my opinion on Roseanne's tweet? The woman does bear a passing resemblance to the character in question, and well, Roseanne can scream at you herself here that she didn't know she was black, and I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have known either. She doesn't look black.
I thought the bitch was white! God damn it! I thought the bitch was white! Fuck!
What do I think about James Gunn's tweets and stories and associations and, general behavior? Woo, lad, let's just say it's a bit sketchy to say the least, and, increasingly difficult to defend that guy. And I'm certainly not defending him. The fact is, some of this shit and the consistency of it is just questionable. I'm not talking about deplatforming here. Obviously, deplatforming is wrong. I'm talking about whether or not they should have been fired from a business's perspective. I think I've made my position clear, but we need to look at why companies would do this. What I've just said, those are just my opinions, and they're my opinions on people who haven't been convicted of any crimes related to their statements. And opinions, as we all know, are like assholes. So here we've got two people, both of whom have said some kind of messed up things, according to one side of the political spectrum or the other, and those two sides are equally calling for their removal, albeit in the case of Gunn, often in a play-by-your-own-rules type fashion. But is it profitable? Vanderbilt and Boselli, 2002, conducted a longitudinal analysis between the years of 1998 and 1999 of an employment agency to see the actual long-term impact of complaints and feedback received from 900 customers regarding their satisfaction. Most interestingly for us, the study also assessed the association between complaint response from the organization and profitability. That means how well did employees respond to customer complaints in their expediency and satisfaction. There are some numerous interesting findings, including that, maybe non-loyal customers are less likely to be happy with service, as we see here with a weak but significant link in a negative correlation of 0.18 between perceived service quality and use of other companies, as well as, more expectedly, complaints being associated with poor reported quality overall. Interestingly though, customers making complaints in 1998 forwarded actually slightly higher sales in 1999, but with no real differences between tendencies to use other companies. In other words, making complaints in the first place doesn't seem to have any effect on people moving to competing companies. But we're interested in how companies respond to said complaints, right? The researchers found positive correlations between complaints handled with both expedience and competence, and all measures of customer satisfaction. However, the same was not true for all measures of financial success, being limited to the short term of sales and profit margins, but not to other measures of financial success, and then only weakly, and really only with satisfaction, with employees' reactions being associated above the level of 0.2 of correlation. Here's the most illuminating part for us though. By the next year, even these small effects had mostly disappeared, although satisfaction remained significant to a minor degree, and while employee placements reached significance for some reason, I honestly don't know, all relationships between expedience of dealing with a complaint evaporated when it came to financial outcomes. So, what are the big takeaways we should glean from this? First, that customers who complain don't appear to be more or less likely to stop patronizing a business after they do that complaining. Secondly, it doesn't appear that responding quickly to customer complaints has any long-term impact on sales. It appears that some of them may have short-term effects, particularly satisfying a customer, but not long-term ones, and even then, not particularly strong ones in either case. Responding to complaints is related to satisfaction with quality, but not so much with the actual bottom line, how much the company actually makes in profits, or so these data indicate. Let's look further into understanding the role of customer satisfaction on profitability then. As you might imagine, there's a ton of research on customer satisfaction and its impact on financial outcomes. But first, we need to further understand just what makes customers satisfied, and yes, a lot of what I'm about to say is probably going to have you saying, well, no, duh, Aiden. But while it may seem self-evident, we do need data to provide evidence for the validity of these beliefs of so-called common sense. Szymanski and Haynard 2001 conducted a meta-analysis that assessed 50 studies with 517 correlations related to customer satisfaction and its antecedents, breaking those variables down into these: expectancy, disconfirmation, performance, affect, and equity, which they found accounted for 94.4% of measures of customer satisfaction. Expectancy is, as it sounds, a basic level of anticipated quality of service, which when met was positively related to satisfaction. Disconfirmation of expectation describes when a business goes above or beyond or beneath and below what is anticipated. Unsurprisingly, providing unanticipated excellent service was also positively related to satisfaction. Performance refers to the service of employees and was related to the satisfaction of the customer to a weaker degree than most of the other measures. And the researchers noted that the literature is actually conflicting on that note, something we will cover in the what is now going to be final video. I seriously have too much to describe in this series. Jeez, I can't believe it's a 4-parter. Anyway, affect refers to the emotions connected to memories of a business or interaction or exchange that was similarly positively correlated to customer satisfaction. So you have fond memories of a place, you're more satisfied. But finally, and perhaps most interestingly, equity was the most strongly correlated variable. Equity is defined in this case as the perception of customers of the fairness or rightness of their treatment in contrast to other groups or people. And that, again, was most closely related to satisfaction at a level of 0.5. In other words, customers are happiest when they think they're getting the best deal. Not inherently, but in contrast and comparison to others. Further, the researchers found that satisfied customers were more likely than unsatisfied customers to patronize a store for subsequent times. This is getting into the no-duh stuff, guys. That satisfied customers complained less than dissatisfied customers, and that dissatisfaction was related to decreased spread of word of mouth regarding a business in a positive light, and instead was similarly positively related to spread of negative word of mouth information. On the notion of word of mouth, Anderson 1996 particularly noted the curvilinear relationship with extreme levels of satisfaction, either positive or negative, in that only the most satisfied or dissatisfied customers tend to spread information about a company through word of mouth. So, from the outset, only the most satisfied and most dissatisfied customers will have generally anything to say about your business. They're the outliers. And although all of the variables assessed were related to customer satisfaction, it should be noted again that equity was the most strongly related. Thus, customers are most satisfied when they think they're being treated fairly in comparison to others. But the main takeaway from these data are that people who like your business will most likely tell others about it, and those who really hate it for the most part will tell people how much they hate it. But the generally satisfied customers are also more likely to remain your customers and help grow your business. But come on, show me the money, Aiden. We've seen customer satisfaction seems to be fairly weakly related to profits, and particularly not so much over time, but that was just one study. Well, friends, I would never leave you with just one study. Gruca and Rego 2005 assessed more than 200 firms from the Fortune 500 in 40 different industries, and examined the influence of customer satisfaction on industry growth and stability by comparing satisfaction rates to cash flow over time. The researchers found that while individual differences in each firm, that being their industry or sector being inherently unrelated, explained the largest amount of variance in their model, customer satisfaction played a small but significant role in determining the future of cash flow, and thus a form of financial success. Particularly, they found that customer satisfaction reduced variability in cash flow by 4%, meaning that satisfied customers are likely to remain long-term patrons. And thus, the more satisfied your customers, the more stable your business is, up to a level of 4%. But this is particularly beneficial in lower investment businesses, that is, things like supermarkets, fast food, and beer, in a positive direction, although there were negative results as well, which we'll discuss. In addition, though, these results indicate that higher levels of customer satisfaction seem to actually have a negative impact on cash flow growth for two specific industries: long-distance telephone services and automobiles. That means there is nothing AT&T can do in terms of customer service to increase their profits, and in fact any attempt to do so is not only futile, but potentially actually detrimental to their long-term financial outputs. So, while we can see that there are differences in how businesses are affected by customer satisfaction based on industry, it seems unquestionable that customer satisfaction does play a role, albeit it looks like a small one. 4% seems like an insignificant number, but it is potentially of import. Further, what the researchers generally found is not so much that customer service was directly related or had a direct, strong, influential effect on cash flow and profits, but more, to a significant degree, on stability and on ensuring that there would be repeat business. That customer service ensures customer loyalty and thereby less variability in cash flow. And further, that this might be more important for low investment purchases, such as, oh, I don't know, a Papa John's pizza, a movie ticket, or even cable access.
To Papa John.
Clink pizza.
Papa's in the house!
That's a good pie.
But hang on, we're not done. Anderson, Fornell, and Mazvancheryl 2004 examined customer satisfaction in association with Tobin's Q, which is a calculation of economic performance by combining capital market data with accounting data, and found a 1% change in satisfaction related to a 1.027 change in shareholder or market value. While this change may seem small and insignificant, even minuscule, in this case we're talking about financial differences and not mere correlations as we usually do, which, kind of exist in an ether. For context though, looking at the top 100 Business Week firms in the year this study was published, across which all had an average of 10 billion in assets, a 1% overall increase in customer satisfaction would thereby, according to this model, output to an increase of any firm's total financial output and value by 275 million. Well, hey, that's big money. Hell, that's incomprehensible money to me. But ultimately, that kind of is a hill of beans to these major corporations, isn't it? I'm trying to provide both sides of the argument. Yes, it's a lot of money on one hand. No, it's not a lot of money to those Fortune 500 companies. And if you're looking at a total impact of 1%, well, let's go away from the Fortune 500 and go down to small, tiny businesses. 1%? That means almost nothing. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but 1%? Also, similarly to Grucka and Rigo, Anderson et al. Found that low investment businesses were often most impacted by the effects of customer satisfaction, meaning things like pizza and fast food and sodas, with moderate investment industries such as restaurants and telecom companies being, well, moderately impacted, and lowest actually shoe stores and discount or value stores. In other words, we're seeing that again when it comes to taste in things, these low-cost kind of items. Customer satisfaction is most important, but what are we talking about with customer satisfaction here? Are we talking about firing somebody because of some shit they said on Twitter? Although we can see here that maybe this is true or potent in some industries with a consistent kind of relationship between cash flow and general profitability, it may not be so for every industry in the same way, and even then, we're still looking at very small effect sizes. So one thing I want to question then here is, are the type of industries that seem to be most affected by customer satisfaction different from those who seem to be less affected? If there even is a difference, because there's some conflicting data. As I said, there are similarities and differences between these studies and the variables being assessed. Customer satisfaction, for example, was highly related to cash flow variability, total financial success, and fiscal outcomes across all the variables assessed in both studies in department stores. They were one of the highest in both, but in comparison, while for athletic shoes, customer satisfaction had a strong impact on cash flow and cash flow variability, athletic shoes customer service was negatively related to the Tobin's Q total economic outcome variable. But areas moderately affected in both assessments were things like restaurants, beer, soda, airlines, and apparel. Based on the information I have here, at least, then, I would suggest, although I don't have a definitive answer, obviously, that satisfaction in those kinds of industries is based very much on the product being as promised and anticipated, not so much on public relations and actual service. In fact, what we see is that in the more high investment industries that also require potentially a lot more time dealing with employees on the phone or in person, such as phone service companies and car purchases, concerning customer service was actually negatively related to cash flow over time, so the more customer service, the poorer your financial outcomes. Thus, it is arguable that when people sit down to enjoy a Papa John's pizza and a Pepsi product, their satisfaction with those products or services is more influential on the bottom line of Papa John's or Pepsi than it is on, say, computer electronics, which, by the way, they found to be negatively related as well. This means that people just want to eat their freaking pizza. What do you need to do to maintain customer satisfaction in that case is different from what you have to maintain in the case of computer electronics. People will be happy if they get their pizza on time and it tastes okay. There's so much more involved in things like film and movies and games. And unfortunately, none of those industries were assessed here. Not film or television or any of that. And that seems to be the area of concern for most of us, or at least interest in the current discourse regarding people like James Gunn and Roseanne and Dan Harmon. But we do have that electronic computer data, right? So let's go back to gaming just for a moment. maybe customer service doesn't matter so much to gaming, based on the data I said that showed that customer service didn't seem to have a positive relationship with financial outcomes in these data, right? In which case, the firing of Jessica Price, a former employee of Guild Wars developer ArenaNet, after she acted like, well, a bit of a cunt on Twitter, was potentially in error on the part of the company, right? But I tend to think games and other media are not a computer electronics as the study describes. They're more like movies in that their users mostly care about the product itself, not the services involved in it. They don't care about the PR, they care about what they are ingesting. In the case of Price, she was booted quickly after her comments on Twitter started to gain significant backlash from the Guild Wars forum users, for example. But hang on, there's the thing. It was forum users, people seriously and highly involved in the game, and therefore definitively customers who were complaining. Now we're back to the operative and important point. Even if complaints don't matter in the long run, and customer satisfaction isn't the strongest predictor of success, if you want to satisfy anyone, you should probably be sure that they're your customer first. And in the instance of the people at ArenaNet, they were pretty sure the people that they were responding to were their actual customers. So were they in the right? Maybe. Again, just to be clear, I'm not talking about morals or ethics. I'm talking just about financial outcomes. So thus, let's summarize what we can potentially learn from all of the aforementioned data. We know that customer satisfaction is most important in low investment industries in terms of its short and long-term effects. That means, yes, Papa John's and Subway are more susceptible to the effects of positive or negative customer service outcomes than are, say, H&R Block. We know that customer service is related to profits and cash flow, but to a minor degree, at the level of about 1% of long-term effect to profits and 4% of influence on stability of patronage. This is further reflected as we saw that in response to customer complaints, the effect of those complaints dissipated over the course of a single year, and that the effects of customer satisfaction on profits were minimal in the first place. In other words, it does look as if the importance of this thing so many businesses hold up, customer satisfaction, is in many ways a myth, even if it was a powerful effect. Ultimately, one thing every single study here presumes is that the participants being polled and questioned were actually customers. When it comes to the Twitter, Tumblr, SJW outrage mob, that is generally not the case. Now, is it? These people don't buy the products they're complaining about, and it is evident in the sales of the comics industry. It is evident in the sales of video games that are aimed at people like this. They are not your customer, so trying to appeal to them is pointless. And by the way, because you hear this all the time, so next time you hear this argument, guys, here's your response. When someone says, I certainly buy comics, yes, I play video games, yes, I watch all these movies, I'm not just complaining in a void, point this out. Okay, bitch all you want. It will not ultimately impact, probably, the long-term financial success of the companies you're bitching about. And here's the data. You have to ask, as a company or organization owner, what's better for your business? To risk offending your core customer base by bending the knee to the outrage mob with the firing of an employee, or restructuring of an entire project, or simply doing nothing in comparison? Now, in the knowledge of these effects, that complaints are short-lived, weak, and even then only applied to those who are actually your customers in the first place, and not just part of the screeching crowd calling for change, what do you do? I'm not saying that anyone was wrong for firing James Gunn. I think, again, I gave you my opinion. That's some weird shit. But we're only talking about profitability. Is it wise for companies like Papa John's to boot their CEO, who is a representative of the core of their customer base, who is the self-made businessman from their organization in response to a few potential complaints from questionable customers? Is it actually profitable for Disney to boot James Gunn because of his really freaking creepy statements and actions? They will lose a lot of money over that. I think more they will lose than they will gain from having capitulated. I'm saying that as someone who is very weirded out by the shit James Gunn has done and said because of this. According to the data that we've looked at here, really, no, it probably was not in your best interest to do any of this. It was not in the best interest of CVS to fire this man for not accepting a woman's shitty coupon. It is not generally in the best interest of Starbucks to fire a manager for calling the police after men refused to leave her place of employ. No. It's just not in your best interest despite the public outrage. It goes away. The complaints are forgotten. They're not your customers. And even if they were, we find that it has so little impact on the long term. Customers who are going to abandon your business are going to do it either way, as we've seen through the data. There's no change there. Whether or not they make complaints, complaints had no long-term effect on the use of competitors. Even at its most impactful, we find that customer satisfaction will only be slightly affiliated with profits over and over again, between the levels of 1 and 2%. Generally speaking, we're talking very, very small effect sizes for customer satisfaction over and over again. Thus, should you cut to the customer? Probably not. But at least if you're going to, make sure they're your customer first. That's why, as I said in the last video, yes, the customer is sometimes right, but only when they're actually your freaking customer. As for this idea of customer satisfaction, have I debunked it? No, I haven't. I've shown a piece of the puzzle, because there's actually more to it. I mean, don't you suspect there is? Haven't we all heard that customer satisfaction has this enormous role to play in the success of a business? I think it might. But, and I'm just taking a shot in the dark here, because I clearly do not have my research ready for the next part or anything. I think that we're talking about a moderator variable, a third variable that hasn't been assessed yet, and that is the importance of employees and employee satisfaction. So far, we haven't given many shits about the importance of the employee in all of these mixes and models. In many cases, we've talked about the employee, but we haven't really discussed their role in terms of how they impact customer satisfaction. And maybe we can consider James Gunn or Roseanne Barr or Dan Harmon or even Alex Jones maybe all employees in some way or another. But maybe we should be concerned with the effect that employee satisfaction has in and of itself on profitability. This can impact every side of the political landscape, as I think I've illustrated through this video series, with now the occasional leftist being removed from their positions of power for offending the public. This is still the entire James Gunn, Dan Harmon debacle that still hasn't even been fully discussed. I'm still trying to go over because, again, every day I wake up, somebody else has come under fire. But given that I want to more thoroughly elucidate the effects of the worker and the employee on customer satisfaction, I think, once again, sorry guys, we'll have to save that last part for another time.
Who knows? That guy always keeps you waiting.
And a last time. Sorry for how long and perhaps tedious these videos are. I do try to make them a bit more entertaining with memes and references and such, but I hope this has been amusing even with the deluge of topics and data. And just as a quick note, sorry about the end of the last video. Something that happens is that YouTube claims a song that was fair use, and then the only way I can get rid of it is to get rid of the song, and then it fucks up my audio. So, oh well. But them's the breaks. Hopefully this video will not get flagged for any reason, although most likely it will. If you have enjoyed it though thus far, please be sure to like and subscribe. I'm Aiden Paladin, Ultana Bolt.
Too many days, friendship is for the lonely. Kissed distant foe.